19-year-old.
Modernism was
very glad to be in Los Angeles right now as an art maker, as an artist.
Do you think video has become a predominant art form?
I don't think that it is a predominant art form. I think it's a predominant information form. Like I think that still within art, there are problems with the video that the commercial side of art has a little bit of a, you know, how do you hold on to this? How is this an object? How is this something that is commodified? How do I buy? And there's a huge market for video art.
How does it become rare enough to commodify if it's reproducible and it's exactly the same?
Right, which is the problem photography had. It's not a new problem, but it is in that a print is a print and a video, it needs a container. It is like music in that way. There's, you know, you need to have something to put it in, and it's different from film because it's of lots of reasons, but one being that film, you're expected to have that screening and it's for an audience, and where video and video art, you know, kind of crosses into these other areas of, well, it's a painting because it's on the wall, but it's a film because I can do this time-based, and there's moving images, and I think that it's problematic in a fun way.
I always think that I don't think galleries quite know what to do with video art yet.
A lot of them don't.
Except for black and room.
Except for black, right? And that's what you see most of the time is like black and room, and I think that partially that has to do with the video artist and choices that the artist makes with presentation. It has to do with the collector and what they are comfortable with and what they're used to seeing, and then also the gallery, like how they feel like they can move these things around. We've seen a lot of art fairs now, the kiosk, you know, where you can sit in with your buddy and you get to, you know, watch videos. And they did that for the California Video Show also at the Getty a couple years ago. And that's video art can be a problem, like performance. How do you hold on to it? Where does it go? How does it get disseminated and presented? And something I think about all the time with my work, like how am I going to present this? Where's this going to live? How is this going to be integrated in someone's life or experience?
Have you found that's been an issue when it comes to people collecting and buying your work? Yeah.
Oh, totally. Because it's like, how do we, you know, I have some experience because of work, like knowing how to deliver files, but I have found that to be, okay, well, I love it, but what do I do with it? What does it mean to own this? What is it, you know, because there's editions, and as you said, it's something that's that's and you have to, like, just like with a photo, you have to kind of put a limit on yourself, and because that's something that we're used to having. There's a rarity and a scarcity that we expect from fine art, and so we have to create those boundaries for ourselves with things like video.
And then it becomes about almost the documentation and the administration around the video with things like certificates of authenticity which actually become the work in a way that
they do, and that's what so you do like dealing with collecting and registrarial things. It is the plans and the certificate and the files, the digital files and tape. That's what that's what the collector gets.
Yeah.
And that's how it becomes an object that can pass through the commercial machine. And then there are people like, Tony Orsler, and his work is really, because he's projecting, right, it's semi-sculptural, and so by introducing that other component, then it's a lot clearer for collectors or for commercial, or just, you know what you're looking at. And as far as the darkened room, that was a problem of technology, and that's something now that's moving pretty rapidly. There are great new LED projectors and screens that are flexible, and the OLED stuff that now you can make sculptural video that doesn't need to have a darkened room. It's got a, it's bright enough that it can handle just living with other things. And that is a great thing about working in video and media, is that technology push behind you, and that can be frustrating because you're always thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever developer is out there. And like, I want to do this. Oh, well, it kind of doesn't exist yet, but you can kind of you get to play, and you get to play on a level that that's like that edge is continually rolling in front of you. So who knows what next year for technology is going to bring, and I think that'll help with the problem of video as far as an object and something that can be commercially sold.
Do you think it still has a way to go to fit comfortably into that gallery?
Yeah, I think that it can. There's some galleries that handle video beautifully. They know how to do it, and they do it well, and they have engineers and artists that know how to make these things happen. But it's something that it does take money, unfortunately. Video is a very expensive thing to show, not to make, as it can be, but to present. It can be very expensive. And so the galleries that are doing it well are ones that understand that, have bought good equipment that's going to last for a while, work with their artists to make sure that things are the way it should be. And artists are starting to know a little more too about like how to say, hey, there's too much light in this room. The blacks aren't black enough. And being able to work with curators more. They're starting to get it. We video artists have a lot to do with that, like just making sure that we have to protect our stuff, as well as try to, like, there's a balance between making sure that it's shown right and making it get out there. Like, we have to do a lot of that.
Now, in your work, you don't shoot your own original footage.
I use appropriated footage, which is its own problem.
Yeah, tell me about that, because it would have the obvious kind of IP sort of issues that it's a potential kind of minefield anyway.
Potentially you just have to, like, you pick your battles and you know what you're doing, and you kind of there have been a lot of lawsuits in the news, mostly with Richard Prince. Yeah. He likes to, but that's like old hat for him. He's been doing that for so. Yeah. But yes, there's there have been some lawsuits, even with Shepard Fairey and the AP. Yeah. And then but because of that, and then there's also things like Girl Talk, which is music sampling. Those things have been kind of pushed through the courts, and people have made up some kind of guidelines, and if you work within those guidelines and you make sure you're doing it right, you're covering yourself in a good way.
So there's sort of fair use provisions there.
There's fair use provisions. With the NASA stuff, it's government footage, so that's something that protects you a bit, because it is like freedom of information. It's all out there and readily available. Things like I did some work with interviews and presidential debates. Those things have already been broadcast. They're a certain age. I'm only using seconds of it at a time, and that it depends. Like there's a percentage of time that is okay to use, and you have to also be able to prove that you're making commentary.
Yeah.
You're presenting this in a new way to show something new, or to educate, or to make a statement that perhaps wasn't made in the original. So you just kind of have to work through this minefield. So I try to stay away from a lot of that. The work that I'm doing now is I've moved past space, and I'm working with South Pacific exploration from the 30s. It's actually my grandfather's expeditions, and so there's my way in. Like there is my tie, because it is actually like my family's artifact. It may live in a museum, but there's a direct tie through, and so I can get access. And it's not the clearest of paths, but that's kind of my way of working through those the free use and the copyright aspects of things.
I think it's interesting that you concentrated for a while on space exploration, and are now looking into images of South Pacific exploration, which is almost like the same idea, just going back in time when the South Pacific was seen as the furthest possible
the furthest possible place. Yes, and it wasn't that far removed from space. Like space was like the 60s is when that really hit, and if you look at representations of the South Pacific in like movies, and it was like the 40s, the 30s and 40s when that was, we kind of, it was a little pre-war, but then definitely after the war, where that was this amazing place that we didn't know, and it was on our planet, and we could get there. It just took
a long time.
It just took a long time. And then that journey, it's still part of it, up or across.
What was your grandfather?
That was my grandfather.
And what was his role? What was he? What was he doing?
My grandfather and my great uncle, and they were sailors, and they wanted to sail, and they wanted to explore. They wanted to go places, and they kind of organized themselves after being able to purchase a boat because of a windfall. A wealthy relative had died and left them some money, and they were able to get their first boat, and they approached a couple of museums in New York, because they're from Long Island. They were able to walk into these museums and say, hey, I've got a boat, I want to go somewhere, this is what I want to do, I want to sail the South Pacific. Can we arrange something? Can we hook up and figure something? So that's this approach to science that I find just completely amazing. That you could just walk in and go, hey, I want to do that.
Yeah.
You want to tell me how to do that? Or they sent, the museum would send people along, or they would send things back to the museum. And it was a really different way of approaching our world and knowing the world. And it was also, not the most scientific or brilliant way of sometimes interacting with cultures.
So was it was this sort of an anthropological mission to the? They
at first I think it was just them. I'm going to say I don't know truly their intentions. I never met them.
Right.
My grandfather died before I was born, and so I've just been reading, notes and letters, talking to my family a little bit. They wrote a book, so kind of looking into that to get a little more idea of their whole reasoning behind wanting to do this, and it's really put out there as they wanted to go and explore first. That was their intention, and then they really got interested in the music and an anthropological side of things after. So the first voyage was more, hey, let's see what we can find, and then the second one was a little more focused. they worked with the museums in a tighter relationship and did recordings of gamelons and other, any music basically that they found when they hit an island. They would take miles of cable out and record whatever was there on an aluminum cutter, actually cutting
on a
boat in the 30s. It was amazing stuff.
It's quite, there's something quite romantic about it, isn't it?
Oh, completely, completely.
Pioneer of,
completely, and that's a modernist thing.
There's
this romance that comes from, and it's the same with space. There's a romantic aspect of it that has perhaps fallen out of favor within the arts. Like romance really took a beating in the postmodernism. I think that's perhaps coming back into some practice now, especially the social practice. And
do you think the digital, the way in which the digital has become so predominant in culture now, has that got something to do with that?
With romance?
With the pulling away from that, pulling away from the physical world as being the frontier?
I think, yeah. I think that also we kind of felt like we hit a wall at some point. There's nowhere else to go. There's that lament of there's nothing new, and I think that pulled us away a bit. It's like, well, if there's nothing new, then and now we're getting okay with there's nothing new and being able to remake and going back to like copyright stuff, like regurgitating or consuming and then producing as a way of creating content because we already know that there's nothing new.
It's almost like the precepts of postmodernism or the predicates of postmodernism of 25 years ago have now just been accepted, and we go, okay, that's new.
I think so. I think it kind of has, because it's part of that moving. It's part of that moving cycle of going from the academy to the avant-garde back to becoming an academy that spurns another avant-garde, and so now that, and of course, it's one of the most devastating things you learn as a kid is like being interested in the arts. That's like you're not doing anything new.
Yeah. That's
completely. I totally remember when that happened to me and how just mind-blowing it was that this all has done before.
Yeah.
And you're following a path that everyone else has followed, and you're not special.
And you really kind of think that you're the first person who's been there and you're clearing the way.
Right.
When you're 18.
Exactly, which goes to this like exploration.
Yeah.
I'm exploring something that's already been explored, and some of these islands that my grandfather went to, they decided these are brand new islands and we've discovered them, and that the people, there are people around that probably been there for a lot longer than you have.
Yeah.
But
I always think that when people say how Australia was discovered.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it was discovered about 40,000 years before.
Right. A couple other people have already, been here a little bit. Yes, I think that's something that now we accept as true, but was not accepted as true for a long time. Like there was, we have, this is ours, we've discovered it.
And that's all to do with the frame again, isn't it? Because our frame has changed. So we now go, okay, America, the Native American Indians were here a long time before.
We have a different view of time and we've maybe kind of backed off on that part of our ego a little bit, being the first. All right, and I think that has just come from. It's become this accepted thing. Like, okay, these guys have been here for a long time, and yeah.
I'm just thinking also with the images from the South Pacific, because you're dealing with older images which kind of pre-video and all the documentation that your grandfather would have taken would be photographic. This obviously is now leading your practice away from.
He actually made films.
Oh, did they? So are you using
16mm film footage, which is just like wow to think about where this came. It's all silent and no color, color, and there are other ways. There are other places like film, like actual film industry, And they did document a lot of sound, and there's objects. So it's not, I don't feel it, I actually feel like it's expanding my practice in this, where I've been working with video, and then I started working with video and photos, and now I'm working with video and photos and objects and music. So it's kind of,
because they would have music recordings, of course, because
so there's tons of those, and then because they were working with institutions, they had the access to some technologies that perhaps weren't as available, and so those things have been, they exist, and they've been now taken into other institutions, like the Library of Congress has the music side of things, and so they've been restoring them, and so they've got, like, there's a good record, and it's clear, and there's material. There's material to work from, and it's archives, so that's another kind of fun place to explore.
Is this where you're actually finding the material now?
Yeah, and my family has a lot of it, but a lot of it is in archives in institutions, and so that's where I'm getting things, and ideally I will add to it in a way. We'll see how that happens.
It's interesting because you're actually dealing with almost like a different paradigm of how we organised and understood, and how we organised knowledge, really, when you're thinking about kind of the early 20th century archive compared to now.
Yeah, completely. And even, I've been working with the mid-century archive of television.
Yeah.
And so then moving into, moving back in time into other ways of understanding the world. It's been really interesting because of having such a divide between the digital, social media, and I have to go on a boat and sail for days and not see anything before I can get, because I can look up these islands on Google Earth, but it took them months. And it's really, it's interesting to go back and forth on that bridge, especially because the way that time has become so compressed through the use of technology. It's been a lot of fun. I'm really having a great time just digging into it. I know that I'm at kind of the beginning of what's going to be a long project, but it's so exciting to discover things that have been discovered that were discovered.
Was there a point where you realized, where you came across this material, or you realized this material was something that you could develop in your own work, where you went, why?
I've been thinking, because this is something that I've lived with my entire life. I've known about what happened. I've known that this is what they did. I started thinking about doing something with it when I was in grad school. I could not wrap my head around what it was going to be and how it was going to happen. And it took years. It actually took working through the space program stuff to figure out, this can be something that I am gonna, I don't have to, in order to follow in their footsteps, I don't have to literally follow in their footsteps. I can, I can take what they've done and look at what I have and create a new archive from their archive, and it's a completely viable practice and an interesting way to present this older work in a new context.
I think that's the important, as well as the importance as well of developing a practice, which then becomes, looking at the South Pacific work, you then have it within the broader context of the practice that you have. Looking at the space exploration, gives it a richer meaning. Yeah, I
think it had to wait. Yeah. It had to wait, and that's something that's hard to learn as an artist. It's when it's time to wait on things. I'm not a patient person at all. I can't wait for dinner, so it's really hard. It was really hard to know that I had to sit on this, that it wasn't ready. If anything I was doing was forcing it, and when growing up with a idea of instant gratification and that being such a part of our lives, that it's been a learning experience, but one that I think all artists kind of have to go through at some point, where you realize, oh, this is going to be big. This is a little bigger than me right now, so I need to hold on to this and look at other things for a little bit, and then I can go back to it. And it's not something we're good at, but I think it's something we all kind of have to wrestle with at some point.
Do you find that when you are working, you tend to focus on one project at a particular time, or you kind of?
No, I normally have several things kind of, but with this project, it's so expansive that I can look at. I can be looking at photos. I can be listening to music. I can be working on a couple of series at one point, and it still fall under this big umbrella, which has been really great for me. Because before, when I was working on the shuttle stuff, I was also trying to do a couple of other things that, because I like having a split focus. I like being able to move from something to something else. It helps me to stay fresh with something. Instead of to really just dive in and beat it, helps me to, okay, I need to be done with this for a minute. Let me go over here, and then I end up learning something over here that then I put back into here. So, some people work really focused, and I don't. I work like a shotgun.